Hello everyone, this is Dion Slow Cole, and this is my week 3 presentation for Advanced Visual Frameworks, November 2015. My app that I decided to do was a parking app that would help you find any locations of parking spaces that you want to have. Idea came from the people I know, a lot of people in cities who just pretty much try to find places, or they're going out and about, they're going to a sporting event or a concert or something like that. They want to know where they can find a good parking space at for cheap. And I found an API that will give the cost of different parking spaces around you by your location. So starting out with the sequence page for the user for the app, of course, you start with your home page, which would be the user asks you to put in their email address and their password, and they would sign in. If they didn't have an account, they could create an account. And if there was no network available at the time, it would alert the user that there was no network available. But once they signed in, it would then take them over to a map page that they would be able to see areas of interest around them if it was a parking space or a parking lot, and the cost to park there if it was around them. And if they didn't like any of that, they can search by venue, and it would take them down here to their venue, a list of venues that was around them, and they could click on the venue and then go back up to the map page. And of course, if there was no network, then it would alert the user that no network is available, and then just have the page that it was on for them and where they were at in that location. But if they did have to create an account, it would come in, they would create an account, which would be pretty much putting in their email address, their name, first and last, and password, and then going over to the map page from there. And if they didn't have a location that could be found once they signed in, it will come over and strictly go straight down to their the venue page. And the same thing, once they hit done, if there were no locations that were around them from their phone, then it would go to the venue page where they can select venues of nearby places around them. So then that way, if they weren't in the city, so to speak, and they couldn't find something immediate in that area, they could still be able to find something where they could park at. And so for the flow of my for the app, the way it would start out, of course, you would start with launching the app, checking for a network connection. If there was a connection, then we would load the cloud. We would get the geolocation, get the API, go to the local storage, and from there we would build our UI out. If there wasn't a network connection, we would alert the user, and then we just go to the local storage and read the data and build the UI out from there. And once we started out and we would go to the geo, we would then pull out the platform. If it's iOS, then we want to put the lat longitude from there. If it's iOS, put the lat longitude into that. So then that way it would take the lat longitude and send it over into our API, create the HTTP client, get the URL, and send that data out from our URL and API data, so that we could then put it into local storage. Local storage, we would then create a table, and we would put our UI API data into that table, insert it. We would read that data, and once we read the data, we would decide on which platform that we were on, whether it was iOS or Android. If it was iOS, build the UI for the iOS, and if it's Android, build the UI for the Android device, and go from there. And so looking at the code of everything is kind of follow along those guidelines. We check we load the cloud services, which we have here with our login name and our password and everything. And then we check for the network. And if it's not a network, then we, alert the user that it cannot connect to the network. And get the geolocation, things we've done in the past. For Android, we have our purpose, where we like to use your location to gather data. Put our lat long in, and the same thing where we would use our geolocation to get the current position of our device and put that into our required API, get our lat longitude for that, and we would send that lat longitude into our API. And here it is where it got a little a little tricky for me because I use two different APIs for this, and one where it would search by your lat and longitude, and then go from there. And if the locations from this search return back 0, then it would run this API, which would then be able to give you some different venues around you so that you were able to use from there. And so you can see if if the parking lot locations are equal to 0, run this API. Same thing, HTTP client. Um, load that information, and get everything, and then you get your venue, your address, and so on and so forth. Or else you'll run a for loop, which I have, and that information was in an array, which I'll show you in a few, where it would get all of the information that was needed as far as the name, the address, the latitude and longitude to be used, any recommendations that it may have, how many spots it has open, and the cost of it all. And we would send that out, and I created two different JS pages to build everything for these two different APIs, which was a venue storage page to read the data and a park storage page to read the data. So going into the venue storage, we then create our table and want to insert all of our values. We'll create the table, and these are our columns that we want to have, and we want to insert into our columns our names and the values from our API into it. Make sure we close it out, and we go from there. And because where I'm located at currently, there aren't any places in the city, so I couldn't really populate the park storage, but I'll show you in a few. The storage, local storage for that. But I did create it to where it would then want to pull in those names from the API that I had from here into that local storage, and be able to read that data and go from there. And once we did that, once we read the data, then of course, if you wanted to find a venue near you, if it is a Android, if the platform is Android, we will open up the Android home page and put it there. And if it is or else we'll open up the iOS home page and put the table data, which is here, which we collected, into that. So I built out my iOS home page, and you can see where we go in, we create the window, we have a label set and a view set so that we can pass those into it, and we have our the text field for the email address for the user to sign in, text field for the password, and make sure we mask it so it's true. Anybody who's looking over their shoulder won't be able to steal their password. And we create our sign-in view and our label, our sign-in label, and then the account view and account label, so that way, if they want to, we can create an account and go from there, add it all to the window, and then created another function for the next page, which would have been the venues. And from there, create our navigation window so that, we would be able to then have some form of escape tool if they clicked on a venue, but they wanted to go back and see something else. So it created I wanted to use a table view, so that way it will hold all of since it's an array, hold all of the places that it will call. So of course, create a table view with a table view section, ran a for loop to run through all of the data and to get the names of each one, and place the hash child on it. So in that way, of course, it will have and indicate to our user there's more information on that row, and placed it all out. One of the problems I was having is that for some odd reason it would not take a event listener on that table. For some odd reason, it kept giving me an error, and I don't know why. So that I can kind of continue to build out, so it would just lead over into my map and more information that users will be able to find. But of course, you add the table to the window, and that closes out that function, and we have an event listener on our sign in view, which takes us to there. And when we run this, and you'll see all the things that I was talking about beforehand. And I didn't get a chance to, because I was getting stuck in a couple places. One of the problems I was having is that it kept looping over and over and over again, which I'll show you, and hopefully someone will be able to help me out on this part and getting that situated. But I couldn't build the Android because of the looping issue I was having, and because of my issue that I was having pretty much with being able to get this thing to parse my data. So we load the app, and you see there, and you see how it's running in the console. It's pretty much taking all of that data and it's looping it through, which you'll see in a second. It's looping through all of this as it creates my table view and go in. All it's just repeating itself over and over again, and trying to solve that problem has been a nice little challenge for me in fixing that issue. And I haven't been able to solve that problem as of yet. And it's just so much that I don't know if it's a situation where I've been running it over and over again that it just keeps creating something into the table. I've tried deleting it and putting in executing the table, the database to delete it, and it's not even working, even getting me close to doing that. So I'm not even sure where I'm at. You can see it's just taking a while to get all the way back up to the top to be able to show exactly where it's consoling out a lot of this information. But if we go in and we sign in, click the sign in button, I haven't been able to get the user information transfer over, but we sign in, it takes us to our listing, and you can see here it's populated a table view for me of all the places that I was able to be, that I'm close around. And as you can see, if you go down, you'll see it repeats over right here, and it keeps going, repeats over, and it repeats over again. So it's been a challenge trying to figure that part out, where it wanted to stop that repeat. But you can see where the locations for it is equal to, I'm getting nulls right here. So if I can get the locations that equal to 0, that's where we switch over and just run our other function to be able to get and run that other API to get all of our different locations. You can see down here in the console that we want to, that we're around in our area, in our location. So it got that part to work and got it to parse this data. It's on a loop, and trying to figure out how to stop the loop so that can continue to build it out and get more information. And one of the cool things, I know that I was able to get the map to work by using the module for iPhone. We're putting this module in, and also a module in for the Android. And Android would have to go get a Google API key, which I haven't been able to figure out that whole part. That's like reading a foreign language right now and going in and downloading the API key for the Google Map. But I was able to test this module out with the documentation and some of the maps that they've provided for us, and that documentation actually works. So I know that the map work part is able to work because I put the module in for that. And once I get to that point, I'll be able to add the map into the app and hopefully get some points of location.